Welcome to the Boundless Bible. My name is David Shapiro.
Hey, I'm Javi Marquez.
And I'm Jason Holloway.
Hi, guys. Excited today for our guest, Debbie CAUDLE. She is the host of the High Ticket Woman podcast. She's a therapist that works with individuals, but who specializes in couples healing and connection. She's a licensed therapist with over 30 years of experience and works with couples virtually. She is a hold no punches kind of therapist, and she gets results.
We like that.
I love that.
Welcome, Debbie. Tell us a little bit about your journey and who you are.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. This is great. As I was saying to you guys earlier, I've never been interviewed by three people all at once. So this is going to be a first for me. I'm excited. I come from a line of teachers, and that was sort of my path initially. It got sidetracked the summer between my junior and senior years of college. And I read this art therapy book, and that just intrigued me so much about psychology that I went back and I took everything I could. And, my parents were a little disappointed, I think, that I wasn't going to follow, in their footsteps. But I found my way back to teaching because so much of what I do as a therapist is really more coaching. I've stepped away from this medical model of everybody being, disordered to really just helping find solutions to everyday problems for people in their relationships.
That's great.
Awesome.
I might need to call you after this episode because I think I need some help.
That's so awesome.
So today, one of the things that I felt would be really good to jump into is we have the story. It's just called the story of the bleeding woman, but this comes from Mark 5:25-34, or also Luke 8:43 through 48. Matthew 9 also has it,
Yeah.
but again, Matthew has a very brief summary of it. If you really want to go in depth, Mark and Luke really has.
Sure.
But just laying down what's going on right now, Jesus is going to Capernaum. He is just gotten off his boat in the Sea of Galilee, and there's a crowd that entered around him.
Yeah.
And he's called to go in and help the leader of the temple at that port, his son, who's not well.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is this crowd circles around him, and this woman who has been bleeding, they said for 12 years.
12 years, yeah.
Non-ending bleeding for 12 years, touches the hem of his robe and is healed instantly. And I just want to kind of, before we go really deep into the story, I just want to start off with the first part of this woman. And, she really is going against social norms right now because we know with Judaism, Levitical laws say, if you're bleeding, you're unclean. So you shouldn't even be in the crowd.
Not at all.
And here you have this bravery for her going in. Let me just state really quickly, mental health wise, you have to be a fairly strong person or at the end of your rope to get to that point. Debbie, have you seen people in your practice where they're willing to do just about anything at this point, going against social norms and all that?
Especially I think early on in my years of being a therapist, you are a generalist, when you're learning and you're training and then working towards your licensure. You see people of all ages, you see all kinds of problems. And so I worked in Texas. I worked in a, I don't know if they have them now, but they're called mental health and mental retardation centers. They're, government funded. And of course, that means you're going to be dealing with a lot of low income, people coming in. Mm-hmm. And so when I think back to those days, especially in those days, yes, a lot of that. People, when I think this woman with the bleeding issue, first of all, I'm really excited that we're talking about this because how easy is it to just sort of like gloss over, three scriptures, right? This woman bleeding issue, she touches his robe, on we go with the story. But it really made me stop and think about what that must have been like for her and then the modern day parallel, because when people are dealing with mental illness, there is such a societal stigma. We don't understand what it's like for somebody to be mentally ill or to struggle with some sort of serious mental health disorder until we've walked in their shoes. We can be very critical. We can be very judgmental. We can be impatient. If you're married to somebody with a mental illness, that's tough on the marriage. So there's so many parallels to what I think this woman went through in biblical times.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, that the story sets it up as bleeding for 12 years.
Yeah.
Because like you said, sometimes you feel ostracized from society as a, somebody who has mental health. And in this case, you can really align the two things because she was ostracized for being unclean. Right. So, but you have to think about what are the, what expounds from being unclean or mentally unwell. It comes with being a pariah, being an outcast, being without a sense of self, or at least a positive sense of self. You don't have a community. The community doesn't, embrace you.
Yeah.
The community pushes you out. This woman spent 12 solid years alone. She couldn't have a job. She couldn't have a friend. She couldn't have
she couldn't
spouse.
Worship in the temple.
She couldn't worship.
She couldn't participate in temple worship.
So that's one of the biggest things I take away. It's not just that she lost everything, which she did, and we can't underestimate that.
Right.
But she also lost her connection with God and her spirituality. Like she was so in the depths of the deepest abyss that she was ready to do what it took to get to what's next.
Yeah. And at this time, I think Mark 5:26, it says, she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and has spent all she had.
Yeah.
Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse.
Yeah.
So she was just getting worse and worse and worse. And then, obviously she saw the Savior.
Which we could talk about the symbolism in this too, right? It's
absolutely.
it's really clear what the Bible is telling you about this story.
Yeah.
The things of man won't heal you, the things of God will.
That's good.
We'll wrap back up into that. But that's what the story revolves around, right?
What's great is, Debbie, you had mentioned before that when you started your therapy practice, you were using kind of old methods that people were using, and over time you became kind of you embraced more of your teaching side and were able to see things differently. When you hear about this woman who had worked with other doctors before, just so you know, again, in ancient Israel, what this were rabbis.
Sure.
These weren't ancient physicians. These were rabbis. And what they would do is they would concoct different things. If you read some of the old manuscripts, what they would do is they would concoct a variation of drinks, and they would mix it with wine, and they would say to drink it. And those were ways that were going to heal you. So she's spending all of her money on things that, today we'd look at and consider, quote unquote, like voodoo magic.
Right.
And going, okay, just drink this concoction, you're going to be great.
Yeah.
And what it took was this new method of Jesus coming.
Yeah.
And honestly doing the miraculous, which is, it really does say something about tradition versus
1,000%.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you really quick, because, it's very interesting to me that we kind of look at the physical health, and everyone looks at it and says it's about the bleeding, but really there is a mental struggle here. And I almost go to the show. Totally. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Debbie, called Alone. There's a show where people are camping, but they're alone, and they stick them alone. And what happens is they're under these horrible circumstances, maybe in the middle of a cold wilderness.
Yeah.
And it's not the cold or starvation that gets to them. It's being alone.
100%.
And this woman has been alone for 12 years.
12 solid years.
So from your perspective as a therapist, what is being alone? Sometimes you're in a relationship and you feel like you're alone. Sometimes you're alone because you choose to be alone. What does that do to somebody's psyche?
Wow, what a powerful question. Yeah. I think there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I don't think they're the same thing. So you can be physically alone, right? But not be lonely because you are very much relying on God. And if God is in your life and you are connected to God and you have that relationship established with him, you're not alone, and you're not alone. But you can feel lonely while alone. And as you pointed out, you can feel lonely while in a crowd of people. So your aloneness doesn't necessarily mean you are lonely. And it really depends on what you're focusing on. When you are lonely, you are focusing on what you do not have. Okay? I do not have connection with people. I'm isolated. Nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody wants to spend time with me. Nobody understands me or gets me. And that's only going to increase your loneliness. It's only going to increase your sense of isolation. But when you take the focus off of what you don't have and you put the focus on what you do have, which is this amazing opportunity to tap into your relationship with your Heavenly Father.
Right.
But then that peace that comes from that, I believe, takes away that loneliness. I mean, that's definitely happened in my life at different times. I'm sure that you guys have experienced that too. So yeah, I don't describe them as being the same thing.
Yeah, for me, 100%, I agree with that. That this story for me is so powerful because when you get to the root of how lonely she is, not just alone, but truly lonely, and then you realize that she reached out, but she didn't reach out. Well, she had been reaching out to other people, to the other doctors. She'd been reaching out to other people. If you watch Chosen, even in the story of Chosen, she would like go wash people's clothes, like just because she was trying to do something, I guess. But Chosen's not scripture, I get it. But but when you realize how deeply lonely she was, what was the cure for it? Going to Jesus.
Yeah,
that was it. And she didn't even have to touch him. All she had to do was get close enough to touch his tassel. And I think we've all been there. We've been at this low, deep, dark hole of a place and reached out for Jesus. And no matter how close we got, it was enough.
Now, I'll tell you something interesting. Again, going back to, what she touched and what significance that has in symbolism.
Yeah.
Okay.
She touched the tassel. So in the laws, God says that man shall wear 4 tassels on his robe. And in it will be 1 blue tassel. And that tassel is to remind you of Levitical laws. So this is to remind you of the laws that God has given to everybody. So what you have is this woman who is going against the law. She's literally not following what the law says by being in a crowd in this unpure position. And she is actually touching the tassel that reminds them of the law. It's really beautiful. It's this symbolic, hey, I'm going to touch the law itself that I'm going against, which to me was always just an amazing thing. Let me ask you something really quickly, Debbie. We sometimes people focus on the woman and what she does, but just knowing she's in a crowd right now where the crowd should not be around her. They are now all impure.
Right. Yeah.
But then she touches Jesus. Who knows this? She touches the part of him, the tassel, that reminds him of the law.
Right.
And not only does he publicly say, who touched me, which he knows it was, but he calls her out and says, daughter, by your faith, you're well. He's pointing out to the crowd, she is unclean. It's an amount of love that, one of the episodes we did, Debbie, was when one of the sins that Adam and Eve created was that when God asked Adam, what'd you do? He blamed the woman. He blamed Eve. And here, Jesus could very easily blame the woman and doesn't. He points out actually the fact that she is unclean. I'm okay with it. She's healed. Let's go on. He's defending her.
Right.
When you do your counseling, especially with couples, what does that mean for you when you try to get people to support each other, not blame each other?
That's good.
Yeah. Again, great question. I am passionate about not. Well, let me say this. Women do a lot of things to screw up their relationship. So, I think sometimes men are, there's a stigma for men coming to therapy or coaching, right? And I think there's even more of a stigma of going to a female therapist because that female therapist is going to automatically side with his wife and it's going to, the two of them are going to gang up. So I'm really passionate about letting couples know right up front, look, I am not biased. I am neutral. There are things that are going on between the two of you that are causing this, whatever your struggle is in your relationship. It may not be 50-50, but there's ownership on both sides here. So what I do really is about, and I always know when people are going to be successful or not, because if they're coming to me and they really just are treating this as a space to complain about their partner, the writing's on the wall. But if I can get both of them to start acknowledging their part in the situation, and that might involve, some sessions together, but then I get them separately. I begin to identify things, patterns, maybe that they brought into the marriage, or patterns within the marriage. And I want to address that very specifically with the husband or with the wife. And sometimes, I'll hear, in fact, I heard this recently, I don't know why you have to talk to me so much. He's doing this, this, and this. And I say to both of them, his turn's coming. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We're focusing on you right now. Don't worry about him, or vice versa. We're focusing on you right now. Don't worry about her. Because once they begin to shift to that inward look of, yeah, you know what? I'm responsible for me.
Right.
I have to stop blaming, and I feel heard, but I recognize that there's a whole lot more that needs to happen here than just being heard. Then we get to make some progress. I think what's so really, really interesting too about this woman with the bleeding issue is that her story is really interwoven with that other story, right? Jesus is on the way to heal this daughter of a prominent, respected male religious leader. So when Jesus stops and acknowledges this woman, I mean, this is not accidental, right? He is really sort of speaking to the crowd, not just to her. He's making a statement.
That's good.
Because he's healing her, not just from the bleeding, he's healing her from the societal stigma that has been placed on her. And I think that's really key, that when she had enough courage and faith to reach out for help, she sort of snuck up on him, right? She didn't even expect him to turn around. I don't know that she even expected him to know that she had touched his robe. I think she just thought, I'm going to touch his robe, I'm going to get healed, and I can sneak back out and everything's going to be fine. But he actually stopped and he turned around. Did he do that for her, or did he do that for everybody else?
Yeah.
So when I think about working with couples, like, men and women, I want them both to hear, I understand your pain. I understand where you're coming from. And I need your spouse to know that I get you.
I think it's great that he answers her. I mean, the words daughter, right? That's not that's a choice use of words. It says it's a familial relationship, and what relationship is closer than that? So he's aligning himself with her in an emotionally connective way. And like you said, he's not just saying that to her. He's saying that to the crowd. He's saying that to say, you too could be here. And even though you thought you couldn't, you can.
Right.
Yeah. What also is really cool is, Jairus is this leader that he was going to see.
Yeah.
And everyone says, hey, Jairus is this synagogue leader who put his position on the line, because at this point, everybody knew who Jesus was. This is the person who already healed somebody on the Sabbath in that same synagogue.
Right.
So everyone says, well, he has all this faith. But if you really look at it, this woman is showing more faith, which is why he's spending more time with her. There's a centurion that happened before Jairus that said, I'm the leader of many. All you have to do is say the word and you will heal. And Jesus was like, I've never seen such faith in all of the Israelites. And here Jairus, he could have just said, Jesus, you don't have to come here. Just say the words. But he didn't.
But he needed him to
come. He
come.
needed him there. This woman is showing so much more faith in this moment, bypassing what the Levitical laws is, doing all the things she shouldn't be doing just to touch his robe.
No, I think you're right, because I think in Mark, Luke 8:50, it says to Jairus, he goes, hearing this, because Jairus said, she's already dead. Like, it's already done. And he's like, hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a pattern there. I think going back to what Debbie was saying, there is a pattern between what's happening there and what happened to the bleeding woman, and going, just believing in God. He also says to the woman, like, hey, daughter, your faith has healed you. And I think for us, we could learn from that, just trusting in God and trusting that we will be healed. We will be better if we just trust in him. We go to him with our problems. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before, David, about Adam, right? And just kind of admitting your wrongs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Confessing your wrongs and saying, hey, I was wrong. I'm the one that did it, not the woman, kind of thing. And coming to God in that. And God is going to go, all right, I see you. That takes boldness for you to do that. That takes boldness, bleeding women, to go to the crowd and come and reach me and actually stay there when I'm asking who touched me. that's great. I think.
Yeah. Well, what Debbie also mentioned, which was really cool, is, you know, when she's meeting with couples, she goes, "Don't worry, your time will come. I'll get to you in a minute."
Yeah.
That's almost exclusively what Jesus says to everybody. Don't worry about what I'm doing over here.
Yeah.
Worry about yourself.
Yeah.
We'll get there. And it's really cool. It's one of those things where people are.
Well, this is it right here, right? He was actually going to the house of the official to heal, and he said, "No, you're first." Like
That's awesome.
he put her first in that moment.
A woman.
Yeah. Also,
Right.
Also,
That's what I love about our faith. I think because
in that ancient culture, that would have been a strange thing.
That
right?
Dead on and go, no, you're a daughter of the Most High. You matter just as much as anybody else.
And here comes the next question I'm going to throw at you, Debbie,
Okay.
which is, some people look at this and they go, well, this woman is stealing, quote unquote, a miracle versus showing the faith and receiving the miracle. Because Jesus says, by your faith, you are healed.
Mm-hmm.
But some people go, well, she just touched him and is stealing. Like, something came out within me. You know,
his power.
He felt his power come out.
He said that, didn't he?
He did. So people go, well, she's stealing a miracle. But relating that to mental health and especially with people that are looking to heal from something, I think that, people are always looking for the miracle, but would you say it is more of the hard work and the work that you put into it rather than just one day, hey, you wake up and you go, I'm great, I'm feeling good?
Mm.
Well, I mean, she waited 12 years, so it wasn't an overnight miracle for her, right? I mean, and we live in a society that wants quick fixes to everything, and we don't like hurting. We go to the doctor, if we're in pain, and we want, medication to get rid of the pain. I always say to people, look, pain, God gave us pain for a reason.
Yeah.
And there's something to be gained and learned by pain, so don't run from it. And, I think what I love about this story about her is that she hadn't given up after 12 years. She still believed that that healing was possible. And, in modern day application, there are a lot of people out there, okay, they're not bleeding from their bodies, whether we're women or men, but they've gone through so many traumas in their lives, broken trust, betrayal, abandonment, childhood pain, divorce, you name it, right? And maybe they've tried a multitude of self-help books or even therapists. They've prayed to God, they've reached out, they've beseeched him, and they still feel unseen or not unheard. Is that a word? Unheard, or even just unworthy. Like I've worked with a number of people who get to this place where they just feel like, I don't deserve a better life. All right. So with the woman in the Bible, had the bleeding issue, her healing, her healing process began long before she came into the crowd. Right. Her healing process began in her mind when she believed
that she's worthy.
Yeah, that's good.
that she was worthy enough to push through that crowd and to touch this tassel of this rabbi who had healed so many people already.
Yeah.
And that was the faith that made Jesus stop and turn to her and say, by your faith, you've been healed.
Yeah, that's good. I feel like for anyone to go to maybe one of your sessions, right? They have to believe that you could help them to even walk through the door to say yes for this, right? It takes two. I think I know some couples that when they talk about marriage couples or marriage therapy, one or the other don't want to do it, so they don't, right? And you could try to force the other one, but it takes them to believe themselves to step forward.
Sometimes what I see is that one person will start and the spouse who's not willing to come at all begins to see positive changes in their spouse. Because my focus with the person who's in my office is, what do you need to change about you that will communicate to your partner that you love them, care about them, and want to be in this marriage? So as they begin to make those changes, the spouse is going, oh, this isn't just a bashing session of how terrible I am. I might want to actually talk to this woman.
That's great.
So I forgot to mention in the beginning, but the whole reason why we reached out to Debbie is that the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important that there are people who right now who are suffering. They are suffering with depression, relational issues, anxiety.
Yeah.
There's just a list of things that people suffer with. And Jesus knew them. This is why he was, came down as a human. He felt these things. He felt anxious. He felt sad for people. You saw him weep for his friends. He had this feeling of relational issues with people. He wanted people to be in a relationship, and he also hurt when they weren't. When they focus so much on the past, when they focus so much on tradition and not so much on who they are today. And we see time and time again, he was very impressed with those that just stepped out in faith and just believed that he could heal them. Let me just ask, as kind of a final winding down, Debbie, what are some of the things that if somebody came to you, say, hey, I'm struggling with, whether it's depression, anxiety, relationship, I'm struggling. What are some of the things that you would say for them to do to start the healing process for them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, if they're Christian, I definitely want to know what their spiritual life looks like and what their connection to God is.
Yeah.
But beyond that, the very first foundational tool that I work with people is to help them identify that they are not victims of their situations, and that what really leads to them feeling a certain way and behaving a certain way is their perception about the situation. When we can begin to change our perception, we now have power over ourselves. We have power over the intensity. I mean, we can't go from angry to not angry, like that. But I always tell people, we're going to use a 1 to 10 scale to start thinking about your emotions in terms of intensity. So if your initial intensity was a 10, what do we need to change about the way you're viewing the situation that brings that intensity down to a 7 or a 6 or a 5? You're still feeling that, but because that intensity has been lowered, the way you react to the situation changes, which means we now have a different outcome.
Yeah. Debbie, I'm so glad you said that, because I had this thought this week that, when trying to think of, how does mental health and Christianity fit together? And I think they fit together like perfect puzzle pieces, right? Like the thing about therapy that I understand is that none of us control what happens to us in our lives. We only control how we react to it. And a lot of therapy is saying this happened to you, but how you respond to it is going to define your future, right? So you have the story of, two twins who grows up with an alcoholic, abusive father, and one of them grows up to be an abusive, alcoholic father to their children, and the other one grows up to be, any number of wonderful things who help people in those same situations. They came from the same action, but they reacted to it differently. So far, is that a fair generalization?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, therapy or coaching, I use those words interchangeably, although they're slightly different, but it's not going to work if somebody isn't already in a place of, I have brought myself to this place in my life and I am unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to me to do something about it. If they are just there to vent, I'm fairly quick to point that out. One of the things that I'm continually asking in therapy is, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
That kind of stops people in their tracks right away. If they just want to vent, I had someone say to me once, Debbie, if I really just wanted to pay someone to vent, I'd go pay my tree out in the backyard. And I laughed and said, well, that's really, to your point, my job is to move you from this place of venting and being unhappy with your situation to stepping up and going, okay, what do I need to do about that? So absolutely.
And so what I thought was interesting about that is the Bible actually does the exact same thing.
It does.
Debbie, I'm a reborn Christian. I was a Christian as a child. I left the faith for 20 blah, blah, blah years, a very long time. I'm old. And I came back about 2 years ago. And so I've been like reimagining this and reinventing it and re-understanding it. And the thing that I realized is all the things you just said are inherent in the Bible. They're inherent in the relationship with Jesus. The Bible has never said you're not going to go through things. It's only given you a a playbook by which to get through them. It's never said you're not going to have dark days, that you're not going to have depression, that you're not going to feel far from God, and you're going to feel low and and deeply abysmal and chaotic. All of David's story past his on his downfall is about that. Job's story is about that. But in all of them, what they offer you is a guide by which to react to all the bad things that happen in your life, so that you then can find truth again. So you can find goodness again. So you can find God again, and Jesus again, and forgiveness and salvation and love. And I'm just so fascinated by the concept that it's all been sitting there since the beginning of time. We just have to look at it and pay attention and follow the instructions.
Yeah, 100%. For sure. We could go on and on about that, undoubtedly. I think when I look at the Bible, I see a giant love story. Yeah. That's what I see. I see God's love for mankind played out through his promises to the patriarch Abraham, and then the nation of Israel, and rescuing them from Egypt and bringing them out of slavery and establishing these laws and making them a nation. And then, the period of the judges where they're turning from God, turning back to God, turning to God, turning back from God. And his old covenant and then his new covenant, and then Jesus coming down to earth and giving his life. It is a giant love story. Completely. But you're right. At no point does it say, I'm going to rescue you from hard things. No, it says, I'm going to refine you through the hard things.
Yeah. And you're going to lose yourself. This whole story we're talking about today is about a woman who completely lost herself. She lost her sense of who she was. She lost her belonging. She even lost her faith because literally the Jewish community wouldn't allow her into the temple, right? It wouldn't allow her to be around her people. It lost everything. But at the end of the day, one of the things we've talked about before is that at the end of the day, we're all children of God. And no matter what identity you give yourself, no matter what victimization you give yourself, you are a child of God. Your identity is secure in our God. Yeah. And I think this is what people lose through traumas of life, through the acts that happen in their life. They lose their sense of wonder and imagination and excitement and innocence, and it's replaced with self-defense mechanism after self-defense mechanism after self-defense mechanism, to the point where sometimes your entire personality is just one big self-defense mechanism. And for me, when I got back into the religion, or back into following God, and realized that my identity was in God, my identity was in Jesus, my identity was pure. Yeah. Although I wasn't, my identity is, I was able to realign my life around that fact instead of continually, castigating myself for who I had become and who I didn't want to be. And I just, again, I can't stress enough how much I feel it's nothing like therapy or counseling. I think that's a really important part for a lot of people to be able to unravel their own selves and find those ways to update and upgrade themselves. But I just find the Bible to be such an amazing foundation for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And unfortunately, I think people don't like to suffer, right? So I think the challenge is helping people to understand God's love while you're walking through a season of suffering. Yeah. Why doesn't God just come down and take this pain away from me? Right. And why does he let, innocent people suffer or good people suffer? I think that's and you guys probably talk about that in lots of other episodes, but I think that is the conundrum that a lot of people struggle with that affects their faith. But I believe, I think it's in James where it talks about count all joy suffering. I believe suffering is such an important tool for growth. And so there you have that mindset shift. Suffering is either bad or suffering is a necessary tool for refinement and growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So Debbie, as we get ready to wrap up, I wish we didn't have to, but if as we get ready to wrap up, are there any final words you'd like to impart just on whether it's on the story or something else? Or
I think probably when I think about this woman and I think about what she endured over 12 years and the fact that she didn't give up, I think the thing that I want to say to people is, look, no, it's not about how long it takes to find that healing. it's about never giving up, never stop believing that healing is possible.
Right.
And God doesn't, just because we reach out to him and ask for healing in whatever way that looks like, it doesn't, and you don't get that answer right away, it doesn't mean that God isn't listening. So when I pray for people's healing, I pray, God, you know what's the timing that's best for this person. In the meantime, help them to learn what they need to learn through this process.
Right.
That's what I want people to really hear, is that in your time, until God does heal you, because he will, in this season of waiting, use that to refine, to be refined, use that to look inwards, use that to improve your relationship with God, to turn to him, not get discouraged and turn away from him.
And to be bold in doing so. You know, she didn't sit at home and say, God, heal me. And he goes, you're healed. She did have to go out of her way.
She had to do something, yes.
She had to do something.
She had to take action,
And we didn't talk about it, but what would the consequences have been had she not been healed and she just walked into a crowd of people like that? What would the consequences had to have been humongous. Like
well, yes. At that point, I mean, everybody was on their way, to shul, to temple at that point. None of them would have been admitted. None of them would have been allowed.
I mean, look,
Jesus would not have been able to heal the next person.
Yeah.
Every one of them would have had to live by Levitical laws.
So, I mean, to your point, Debbie, he will heal you. You have to be patient, but you also have to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to be bold, to stand up, and to do something that's uncomfortable in order to get that blessing.
Yeah, you also have to trust.
And scary.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. Debbie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for just sharing some time with us and talking on, one of the stories of the Bible that, again, it's a very quick passage, but has so much meaning in there and a lot of love, showing what God truly feels about us and calling him daughter, calling her daughter. It's just it's a huge blessing to go over the story with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being with us, Debbie.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Another great episode, another great guest. We're so thankful for Debbie for spending some time with us. We ask you to reach out on our socials if you want to get a hold of Debbie. Debbie, how would they get a hold of you?
Oh, best way is my website, DebbieCaudle.com. My phone number's there. My email's there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Guys.
My pleasure. Thank you.